This is a Category 5 hurricane, and it's big enough to erase an entire city from the map. How does anyone survive this cataclysm? And I am going to show you the difference between this and the Category 4 hurricane. A Category 3 hurricane all the way down to a Category 1 hurricane, which, by the way, can still knock you flat if you're not careful. We're going to see the scale of damage each category can cause, what makes them so big, and what is your likelihood of survival if you get hit by the full force of nature. Hurricane Anna hit Hawaii in 2015, a relatively small hurricane, but don't let it size fool you. This is a perfect example of a Category 1 hurricane. Anna packed winds up to 85 miles per hour, strong enough to knock out power lines, cause minor flooding, and send loose objects flying. It lasted for 15 days, churning across the Pacific Ocean. Even though it never made landfall, Anna still managed to cause about $10 million in damage, thanks to high wind and heavy rain. But the real danger is when the hurricane reaches the shore, like Hurricane Debbie did. Debbie stalled over Florida, dumping over 18 inches of rain before slowly crawling up the east coast to make a second landfall in South Carolina, flooding 385,000 properties and causing a whopping $12 billion in damages. The good news is that with proper preparations, the survival chance for a Cat 1 is pretty high, over 95%. To be accurate. If you follow safety guidelines, stay indoors, and secure loose objects, you'll be annoyed by the power outages, but as long as you're prepared, you're likely to come out just fine. But this is nothing compared to what's coming next. Hurricane Francine hit Louisiana's Gulf Coast in September 24, with winds reaching 100 miles per hour, making it a Category 2 hurricane. Francine didn't just pass through, it camped out, dumping buckets of rain and turning streets into rivers. Flooding left nearly 400,000 homes without power. But hey, don't panic yet. With a bit of prep, the survival rate for a Cat 2 is still fairly high, 90% to be exact. You just need to stay dry and keep your snack stash handy. But hold on tight, because from Category 3, hurricanes are considered major hurricanes. And let's just say that things get a lot crazier. So let's assume you survived the previous categories. But what happens when wind crosses the 100 miles per hour mark and streets turn into torrents? Once a hurricane crosses the Cat 3 line, things get really serious. We're not just talking about strong winds and rain anymore. We enter the realm of major structural damage, life-threatening storm surge, and widespread blackouts. When a Category 3 hurricane comes knocking, don't wait around to see what happens. Basically, cities start to shut down, evacuations are ordered, schools and businesses closed, and it becomes a race against time to secure everything. The safety of thousands of people is at stake, and a single misstep can turn a city skyline into a mess of shattered glass and twisted metal. A perfect example of how destructive Cat 3s are is the recent Hurricane Milton. It made its landfall on Florida's west coast, right near Tampa Bay, on October 24. Milton crashed in with winds of 125 miles per hour, enough to rip off roofs, uproot trees, and toss car around like toys. The storm surge was over 10 feet, completely flooding coastal communities. Milton's path of destruction left 500,000 homes on its way, causing complete blackouts and serious damage. The total estimated cost, $100 billion. That's not just a big number, that's enough to rebuild the small city from scratch. Category 3 hurricane formed just like any other storm, as a cluster of thunderstorms overwhelm ocean water. But when conditions are just right, it begins to spin faster and faster. Hurricanes are steered by wind currents, called trade winds. Depending on these winds, hurricanes can suddenly change direction, stall, or even loop around. In the case of Milton, it moved very slowly but surely, dumping an enormous amount of rain before drifting up to the coast. When a hurricane like Milton hovers over warm waters for too long, it gets stronger and stronger. The storm's eye wall, the area with the most intense wind and rain, tightens up, and the wind speed can jump by 50 miles per hour in just a few hours. If you find yourself in this situation, you need to stay calm and think fast. Find a windowless room in the center of your home. If water starts rising, which can happen very fast, you need to move to the highest level of your home. Avoid the basement at any cost. You might think it will protect you from the wind, and it might, but you will drown to death. Keep a flashlight, food and water for at least 3 days. And don't go outside. Flying debris and high wind makes it too dangerous to step outside even for a quick look. And if you hear that things are calming down outside, don't be fooled. You might just be inside the eye of the hurricane, and it will pass over, for you to face the other half of the hurricane. If you're stuck in a Category 3 hurricane and can't evacuate, and you're in a very strong, heavy building, you might get something like 70% of chances if the building is big enough, and of course if you avoided the basement. But this survival chance can drop to 0 if you're on a flooded area or near the coast. And keep in mind, this is only the first category of major hurricanes. What comes next is literally a cataclysmic event. Cat 4 hurricanes are when things get downright deadly, but at a very large scale. We're talking about winds that are strong enough to tear through concrete. One recent example is Hurricane Ian that hit near Cayo Costa in Florida on September 22. This humongous beast extended across 400 miles, literally engulfing the entire state of Florida, with winds reaching up to 150 miles per hour. Ian caused severe flooding across not only a city but the full region. Ian caused 113 billion in damages and destroyed Florida's coastal communities like Fort Myers and Sanibel Island. Being stuck in a Cat 4 drops your survival chances to under 60%. The problem with Cat 4 in comparison to Cat 3s is that at this scale they caused a lot more widespread catastrophic damage. While a Cat 3 can already cause significant destruction, a Cat 4 will take it up a notch, often leveling not just towns but entire regions. It will flatten buildings, include homes, schools, hospitals, and cause months of blackouts, and the affected area may become inhabitable for a very long period. For instance, Hurricane Laura in 2020 devastated large portions of Louisiana, effectively rendering 15,000 square miles uninhabitable. It even knocked out power across multiple states and left nearly 1 million homes without electricity. Hurricane Harvey is another example of a Category 4 that caused over 125 billion in damages across Texas, flooding again not cities but entire regions, displacing hundreds of thousands of individuals for months. And the major problem is that we're seeing more of these hurricanes lately. But it's not just a coincidence. Scientists believe that climate change play a huge role in this trend. Warmer ocean waters act like a supercharger for a hurricane, giving them energy that they need to grow bigger, faster, and more destructive. Add to that rising sea levels, and storm surges become even more dangerous. So when a Cat 5 hits, it's not just high winds. There is a wall of water ready to flood everything in its path. Category 5 hurricanes are the absolute worst of the worst. This is when things get apocalyptic. Winds strong enough to instantly level entire cities, no matter the resistance of the buildings. And this behemoth of nature can swallow multiple towns at once. But Category 5 are rare beasts. Since records began, only a handful of death monsters have actually made landfall. Why? Because it takes a perfect contribution of factors: warm waters, very low wind shear, and no interruptions. If you're wondering why hurricanes sometimes lose strength before hitting land, it's because they need warm waters to maintain their powers. As hurricanes get closer to the coast, they lose access to that precious warm water. No fuel, no fury. Land also acts like a giant speed bump. It creates friction that disturbs the storm's structure and weakens it faster. So while hurricanes can still pack a punch when they reach land, this natural weakening process means we're spared from their devastating potential. One of the most recent Cat 5s reaching land is Hurricane Dorian. It made landfall in the Bahamas on September 2019 with sustained winds above 185 miles per hour. Dorian tore through the Abaco Islands and later the Grand Bahama Island, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Yes, a Cat 5 can swallow an entire island and spit only rubbles. Entire neighborhoods were flattened. I mean literally flattened, bringing storm surge to 23 feet, which is taller than a 2-story building filled with angry waves. costing enough structural damage to rebuild a small country. Again, survival chances in this kind of situation is completely hypothetical, but let's assume that you're in a cave somewhere very high from the flooding, unprotected from the wind. In that scenario, you might have up to 50% of chances of staying alive, but you need to be prepared for weeks of devastation and no energy and food source for months. If again you're stuck in a low-lying area near the coast, your chances of survival are about as good as trying to stop a train with your bare hands, practically non-existent.